And welcome to Yahoo Finance on the Move. Want to introduce some of our guests right now as we take a look at the markets because we do have a sell-off underway. Want to bring in Brent Hill from Jefferies. He's an analyst on big tech. Also want to bring in MIT's David Austin Professor of Management and author of The Hype Machine, Sinan Aral, both guests of this program in the past. Good to have you both here. Just want to remind everybody involved, we have to unmute mics. But let me start with you, Brent. Specifically, the tech stocks are off today. Google, Alphabet down about 4.5%. Microsoft off about 4.5%. Twitter, wow. Ted Cruz, I felt like I needed to go to a safe space when Ted Cruz was yelling at Jack Dorsey. And then Facebook, Twitter's off 5%, Facebook off about 4%. What do you make of what we've just witnessed in the first part of this hearing?
Yeah, I agree with you. I would not want to be sitting in front of Ted Cruz. That was not a fun session. I think, look, this is a recycled ongoing issue that we've seen for quite some time, which is there's no rule book. Tech industry is trying to create some type of established set of rules. What is in bounds? What is out of bounds? And I think, Jack Dorsey said, he agrees it feels like a black box and that you need to have greater transparency and openness. And so, look, I think all the tech companies want to meet in the middle. I think the politicians are effectively a little too severe and they don't want to over regulate these companies because effectively what's going to happen is it's actually going to make the walled gardens go up. So more regulation is going to be harder for innovation on a lot of these tech startups. And I think everyone has a hard time believing that, but I think that's very true in a lot of the expert calls that we do. So we think there's a middle ground. We don't believe there's an issue for investors. The issue with the market right now is really risk off in tech, big run, and you got the election and you got a pandemic that's spiking. So I don't believe that there's really, any real issue for investors to worry about at this point.
Thanks, Brent. I want to bring Sinan in too. This is Julie here. It's good to see you, both of you. Sinan, what responsibility do these companies have when it comes to these issues? And I know this is something that you've talked to us a lot about and thought a lot about. But at the end of the day, right now, the law doesn't seem to force them to do anything in terms of content moderation, et cetera. So what is their duty on that front?
Well, I think that they have a duty to align their long-term shareholder value goals with societal goals, because if they don't do that, they're going to continue to experience this backlash. And that backlash will come in the form of employee whistleblowers talking from within. It'll come from employees abandoning the company. It'll come from the Delete Facebook movement and the Stop Hate for Profit movement, which again were drops in the bucket of their bottom line, but are driving a broader societal zeitgeist. And it will definitely come in the form of regulatory backlash, which is what we're experiencing today on our televisions. I think that this hearing is incredibly politicized a week before the election. It's almost as if they're not really interested in asking substantive questions about Section 230 and how we can move ahead, but just want to make political points on both sides of the aisle. I think both sides of the aisle are guilty of it today. And I think that the platforms are facing what I in my book called the transparency paradox, which is that, yes, we want more transparency to their algorithms and how they work, but we also are telling them we want more privacy. You'll remember that the sharing of data with an academic institution is what caused the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So this is exactly the dilemma they find themselves in, and it will continue. I'm just looking at the title of the hearing, which itself is so politicized. Does Section 230 sweeping immunity enable big tech's bad behavior? Could you come with a less sort of politicized title than that? I don't know.
Sinan and Brent, I just want to ask both of you. This is Dan Halley, by the way. What then is the key to Section 230 being revamped? We have both sides of the aisle coming out saying that there are issues with either misinformation, disinformation. We have issues related to election interference, Holocaust denial, obviously something that's come up. Both companies have now put in place rules about that. World leaders get different sets of rules, though. So I guess to Brent first and then Sinan, what does what happens here? What should we see change with Section 230, and what would it have an impact on the internet through?
Well, from an investment perspective, what we've been saying is that I think ultimately these companies will do the right thing and find the right middle ground. And for investors, the regulation is really a sideshow. It really, for us, has been, with the coverage of Microsoft for 20 years, has been a great opportunity when there's concerns over this to invest in these platform stories, and that's been the case. And so I think ultimately what's going to happen is we're going to find a middle ground. There's going to be no massive breakup. Everyone's going to find a way to have peace on both sides, and they want to do the right thing, because ultimately, the regulators want to effectively protect us as consumers, and the tech companies want to keep innovating to provide services that help run our life. And I think these platforms are helping our lives and improving, how we get to spots. Is there traffic? What are our friends and family doing? Like, these things are all good. So ultimately, I think from an investor's perspective, and that's where I take this view as a fundamental stock analyst, that regulation has been ultimately a sideshow for us, and is ultimately there's going to be a middle ground found. And we think ultimately these are great long-term investment stories that will do the right thing.
Yeah, so for me, I have a very clear position on this. I do believe that Section 230 is essential to internet freedom. I do believe that it's essential to many, many different lines of businesses, from the commenting section of the New York Times to Facebook and social media to Wikipedia to reviews and everything else. I think that when it comes to regulating speech, I think we need to take a representative and legislative approach. So we need to circumscribe Section 230 protections with legislation like the Stop Sex Trafficking Act, which looks at a specific type of harmful speech. And I think that the best place to do that is in the legislature, which is representative and deliberative, not in a 5-person commission like the FCC or the FTC. I don't think that that's where the rules should be drawn. Those are politically appointed positions. And I think that the Supreme Court also has a say on the First Amendment, obviously, and its relationship to the 14th Amendment. With regard to the companies, I thought today that Mark Zuckerberg was well prepared. I thought his answers were obviously very well prepared and rehearsed. I thought that Google took a big hit from Amy Klobuchar. I think it tees up the antitrust hearing. Her repeating 90% over and over again is not a good look for Sundar Pichai this morning. And I thought that Jack Dorsey, frankly, although I think that Twitter has done some great things on their policies in the past, was not prepared. He was really browbeaten over the Biden emails, and he was also really browbeaten and kind of caught on the Holocaust denial when Facebook has sort of taken a very clear position on that in the last couple of weeks. And so I don't think it's going very well for the tech platforms in the hearing today. But I also do believe, like Brent, that largely we're going to see not big breakups. There is talk maybe of selling Chrome from Google. I think that Google Google and Amazon face important challenges in the antitrust hearing. And I think that largely Section 230 should and will remain intact, and that we'll find legislative solutions to the balance between free and harmful speech.
So Sanam, let's talk about Section 230, because you alluded to the timing of all of this. Obviously, 6 days out from the election, we knew it was going to be a political hearing. Post-election, those reforms that you suggested that need to be made on Section 230, how much of that do you think will actually go through if, in fact, there is a shift in Congress and the Democrats do take the Senate? It seems like there's more bipartisan support for antitrust right now, more than content moderation.
Yeah, I think that a lot, as we all know, we're kind of waiting with bated breath. And unfortunately, we're not going to know the election results probably next week. We'll probably have to wait. But I think we need to move on things like the Access Act, which is going to bring interoperability to a lot of these platforms. I think that's important for competition. And I do think that, it depends. There are so many races, North Carolina, South Carolina, that are going to determine the Senate. Ask me in a week is really my answer. I think once we know what the Senate looks like and what the presidency looks like, I think we'll know a lot more.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here, hanging with us during this break here, giving us your perspective on the goings-on today. Sinan Oral is MIT's David Austin Professor of Management. He is the author of The Hype Machine, which you see over his shoulder. And Brent Thill, Jefferies analyst, who covers big tech. Thank you both. Hope to see both of you soon as we continue to cover these stories.